Wednesday, September 25th, 2024. My name is Kim Lantis, and it's my pleasure to be hosting today. Joining me is our guest, Shalabh, who is co-founder of AssertAI. Shalabh, it's so good to see you here on Dojo Live again. We got to meet at High Tech there in person, but it's great to have a live interview this way. How have you been?
Good afternoon, Kim. Thank you for having me. Doing
Yes,
well. It's a great fall day in Chicago today.
I'm so glad to hear it, and I'm so glad to be continuing the conversation today. You know, it's going to be a really great conversation because we're diving into how to make AI usable and actionable, and trying to look at the question of how do you move beyond the hype. There is a hype of AI and actually implement solutions that make an everyday impact. But before we get into those details, we'd like to know the Shalabh story just a bit. Kind of tell us a bit about your background, what your passions are, and how this has sort of led to the co-founding of AssertAI, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I started my career. I started my career in banking. Spent 5 years there. Uh, Interesting fact: took a 2-year break. I originally come from India and from the mountains in India, so took a 2-year break and went hiking for 2 years.
Wow.
So I did my soul searching in the late, in my late 20s. Um, the one thing I kind of figured out is I really like playing at the intersection of technology and business. So making technology usable in business. That's something I did at Citibank to start with, where I started my career, and then I moved to this data analytics company, which is a startup. When I joined them, it was called Latent View. Spent 11 years with them. We did a whole lot of using the data that is generated through transaction systems, through behavioral systems, websites, and so on and so forth to improve business outcomes, right? So customer experience improvement or revenue generation and so on. Again, playing at that intersection of technology and business. So I spent 11 years there. Really liked the the area where you're sort of making this data usable and making a difference to the business. The thing I kind of wanted to do was, AI was heating up, right? So we kind of knew that that's where a lot of the action in the future is going to be. But more importantly, what was very interesting about computer vision was that we can now create data, a whole lot of new data that we could not earlier, right? There are more than 7 billion cameras in the world. There are more cameras than human beings in the world, right?
What?
Yeah.
And
if there
it
is,
makes sense. It makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, because everyone has a cell phone. That is a camera.
Yeah, I
Then
had
add
thought
all the
about it,
CCTVs. Yeah.
but it makes sense.
And so imagine the power of if you have the AI to be able to create data from cameras, right? And then now we can do that. So that's kind of what pulled me into it, because if you're able to now create so much more data, then at a in a scalable fashion, then that can really drive huge value for businesses, individuals, what have you. So yeah, that's how we started.
Absolutely. And that's enter AssertAI, who does in fact capture data from cameras. Tell us a bit about your company and the problem that you're solving.
We are a computer vision software. We operate off pretty much any video source, but the most common video sources we operate off are CCTVs because they're already there, right? So you don't need to do any new capex. We can plug into a CCTV that you might have there, and we do computer vision processing on the edge, which is kind of what is different about us, in that we're not taking it to the cloud, so we don't need infinite bandwidth. We send a device out, all the video processing happens on the edge, on prem, where the cameras are, right? And that then the computer vision algorithm will actually extract the information from the video that we are interested in, and then use that metadata to drive real-time alerts. You can drive more medium-term trending information. I think the most obvious, there can be a million uses, of course, I like to think, right? But the most obvious usage is for anyone that owns large physical assets. So think manufacturing plants, think theme and entertainment parks, right? Think cruise lines, right? Or think distribution centers. So manufacturing, distribution, certainly one big area, and then anyone else with large physical assets. So I think part of the reason I was at High Tech when we met was because we work with hospitality too, specifically the theme parks, entertainment parks kind of businesses.
All right. It makes a lot of sense. So, let's shift in terms of AI at large, answering the question of how to make it usable, making it actionable. You mentioned this word, the AI hype. and how businesses might be able to refocus from this excitement or this hype around AI into kind of practical outcomes. Can you speak a little bit to sort of the dangers of what you mean by hyping or overhyping, and maybe what the real focus should be
What hype are you talking about?
of AI?
I'm kidding. I mean, it's all real.
Hello, testing, testing.
So, so on a serious note, though, Kim, I think it's not really. I wouldn't say the danger in that. I don't see the hype being. I'm sure there are people I think who are more qualified to speak to. The everyone talks about how it might be dangerous to humanity. So I'm not here to discuss that, but more specifically, and this is not in every tech hype cycle, whether it is big data or it is analytics or whatever, the hype is more that we tend to get excited more about the solution than about the problem. So there is this shiny object syndrome. I mean, I have AI, I want to use AI, right?
Yeah.
So the hype is that everyone wants to use AI. And shockingly, despite, having seen this cycle go over and over again in the last 30 years, people don't take a step back and ask the question, what are my problems that I want to solve, right? Because those problems haven't changed. I mean, the problems were there yesterday before AI was there, and the problem is there today after AI is there, right? So if I think of hospitality, I mean, the kind of problems I might have is I have long lines, right? And I have dissatisfied customers because of long lines, or I'm not able to forecast my staff well enough to be able to mitigate the line, right? Or I have a customer experience problem. I mean, my cost of customer experience is too high, but my customer experience is bad, right? And I'm sending them, all of them, to, let's say, digital channels and IVRs and so on and so forth. And that's making them unhappy, right? So that problem is there. Now, I think fundamentally, we need to still go back and say, AI or no AI, what are my problems? The interesting thing, though, is when a paradigm shift like AI happens, what does happen is problems that you earlier thought were either unsolvable or too expensive to solve, they can be solved now, right? But it does always have to start with the problem, so we do not get caught in this infinite cycle of trying to do so many experiments and trying, running left, right, and center, trying to use AI for problems that don't matter.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. It makes me think back to a couple of the series and shows that we had along with David Chesler and Provision Partners. And I think at Provision they refer to this as AI washing, right? So not wanting to implement or do AI just sort of for AI's sake, but then of course making sure that you are in fact finding a solution for an existing problem. And I think even prioritizing, right, those problems that you're seeing, and making sure that that's making most sense of what's going to have the biggest ROI. I think when it comes to then identifying that problem or creating the designs, and you mentioned already earlier this idea of user experience. What should we pay attention to? How much of an understanding should we have in terms of then the usefulness, the usability side of how we want to implement our AI system?
So again, I kind of go back to, it doesn't matter what technology you're trying to apply. Some of these principles you should always keep in mind, because usefulness and usability are the most important thing. I mean, I can have the best AI. If it's not useful and usable for the end user, it's a failure. I think I was reading a report yesterday, I forget who it was from, but all the enterprises that are using AI today are basically saying, hey, 99% of that is just doesn't go beyond pilot stage, right? So we kind of do a pilot and then don't go anywhere. So the hard work of understanding your user's journey, the day-to-day of your user, you still need to do that. You still need to figure out who your end users are, spend the time talking to them, understanding, what problems are you solving for them, and then figuring out how does your tool or your AI or your platform solve that problem. So, I mean, I'll give you an example, right? When we work in hospitality, a lot of our solutions are around, I was saying, large physical facilities, right? So I am running a large resort and I have multiple attractions in there. I end up having these long queues, right? And now, but I don't know when they are there. I don't know the patterns always. I kind of have some sort of an intuitive understanding, but I don't really know. So, hey, can we have these cameras generate this data for us, right? So when we started working with some of our clients, they said, yeah, getting alerts will be useful, right? and we all get excited. We generate alerts, and then what we realize is, as the end user, the person who's the operator at that theme park, let's say you get an alert on your phone saying, "Oh, there is a line of 20 people." I mean, you're like, "Duh, I know." Right? Like,
1, 2, 3,
right?
4, 5.
I mean, I can see it, either that, or you give them an alert and you say, "Oh, there's a line of 20 people," and they start working on it. And 2 minutes later, there's another alert that says, "Oh, there's a line of 22 people." Well, it was 20 in 2 minutes ago. It's not going to change in 2 minutes, right? So we had to very painstakingly, user by user, go and understand how they are using the platform. How can we make adjustments? So I don't need to give you an alert every 2 minutes. I need to give you an alert every 25 minutes, right? One. Two, instead of just telling you these lines are getting bigger now, once I have enough data, can I predict the line is going to get bigger an hour ahead, so you can do something with it rather than just react to it when that happens. So again, these are none of this is particularly fancy in the sense that all of this is common sense, but you will not understand what that common sense is till you spend the time talking to your users, going back, iterating, improving, right? And that is extremely important.
Absolutely. And then it goes to the usable and then the actionable piece. So okay, making it usable, an alert every 2 minutes is not useful. An alert every 20 minutes is. Maybe, the predictability of peak hours, peak days, things like that. But then what are some of the actionable items then that you could, let's just stick with the resort and the queue length. Let's just say it's an entertainment, I don't know, some type of ride or something. Are you then able to, communicate, let's say, between rides and, okay, there's 5 people here, there's 60 people here. Why don't you go tell the back half of the line that you could head over to X ride and come back here in a half hour? Or are there other types of actionable, like what actionable items are we seeing with that technology?
Actionable is a big word, but sometimes you can be, actionable is also a lot about meeting your user where they are, instead of throwing something at them that you have created, right? So just give a simple example. Again, when we talk about resorts, right, you start talking about, I'm generating all this data, I'll create a beautiful visualization that will show you what is happening, right? Now, that beautiful visualization is great for the management team, right? Because they just want a summary of what is happening. But your operator, right, the ride operator, or someone who's manning the guest services desk, they're not going to go to the dashboard. To expect them to use the dashboard or try to drive adoption of the dashboard with them is really solving the wrong problem, right? What they might need is a Teams alert, because that's the platform they use most commonly. What they might need is an alert on their POS system that they're using, right? So a lot of actionability is not even just about creating the right kind of data, but delivering it in the right mechanism to the right person at the right time.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and it goes to this idea of taking the person where they're at, the tools that they're using, and this ever constant, I guess, need to balance, right, technology with human interaction, particularly important in the hospitality space that we're talking about. Any tips on sort of finding that sweet spot between, tech-driven efficiency and then maintaining that human touch?
Yeah, so let me kind of answer that in two parts, Kim, because I think what you touched upon there, which is AI and human interaction, is something that I'm very passionate about. We all of us at AssertAI are very passionate about. My co-founder Job talks about it a bit too. But let me first answer for hospitality, and then I'll go to the broader context. So in hospitality, you have a guest who's there to have a good time, right? Almost always. Particularly if I think of my clients, you're thinking cruise lines, you're thinking, theme parks and so on. They do want some efficiency, but they're there to have a good time, right? So I think my view is that if it's guest facing technology, right, it's always better to have a human in the loop there, a human interaction there, because you do not want to create a very sanitized, efficient experience that no one really likes, right? There is a lot of value in a smiling face greeting you, You replace that with a kiosk, and only with a kiosk, not everyone may like it, right? So there is a lot of opportunity though to enable that front facing staff with the right kind of tools that are AI driven in the back, that give them the right information at the right time to make your guests experience better, right? So just broadly think of this as the right balance being, if it's guest facing, have a human element there, but give those humans the tools they need to do their jobs better, right? So they're
I
not
love
getting
it.
yelled at by the guests,
I
right?
think it's another theme that had come up previously in that same series is the convergence, right? The convergence of the back of house with the front of house, and I think you've tipped on it, touched on it very very well. So we're also talking about any tips on hospitality aside, or what have you seen that works well to help companies strike that balance of making those decisions.
So even before the balance, right? I think we have this whole thing of, it's not human versus AI, right? It's a human with AI versus a human without AI. So,
I love that. I think that's the quote that we're going to take from this show.
and the reason I bring that up is, even zooming out of hospitality, and forgetting this part about the need for, let's say, human interaction that we have. No AI today, not any part of AI is something that you can just plug and trust it to do everything. You do need a human in the loop for anything you do, right? So for us, for example, what that means for us is, while we implement our AI models and read the data from the cameras and so on and so forth, we have a dedicated support team. There are 5 people in our support team, actually 7, I think, right? Their only job is to monitor how well is our solution working every single day with every single client, so that they can find errors, and there are errors, right? I mean, it's never going to be 100% accurate, so that we can continuously improve, right? So that human in the loop is an absolute must. When you're trying to design an AI solution, right? Do not design something that's going to automate completely or will give control to an algorithm. You need a human in the loop who is able to make the final decision, or is able to then tell the model it is wrong and create a feedback loop with it.
Right. And so what I'm hearing is it's a lot of what we already know in terms of the software development cycle, human nature. So it's not a replace here, it's an enhance. You're still talking about the need to take the user experience, the usability into mind, always keeping, a human in the loop or in control. So there's this iterative nature, right? The continuous learning, this adaptation. Um, that's not going anywhere.
Not at all. I mean, not to my mind, right? Like I said earlier, it's a human with AI versus a human without AI, right? The way I think of AI is, uh, it can make you much more productive if used right, but it's still you or I that have to use it, right? It's not, you can't just like let it go fly and say, hey, this will replace a bunch of different things. It will not, right? It'll just make us more efficient, it will make us more productive. It likely will make us focus on things that we like to do rather than things we don't like to do. So for example, I personally use a lot of chat gpt and other gen AI products to create presentations and create narratives. I still do the thinking, but I kind of use it as a bot that can just do things that I would have taken 6 hours to do and wouldn't have enjoyed doing, and it can do it in 5 minutes.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree with you. It kind of makes us, instead of being, if we want to think of terms of like an orchestra, I'm not playing the cello, I am now directing.
Yep, absolutely,
And it's
absolutely.
really fun. It's super
Yeah.
fun. Um, uh I lost my train of thought talking about that. But yeah, I think it's super fun. I was gonna say, so it's like it's still the same iteration, but rather than doing one cycle in a set amount of time, I'm able to do 10 cycles and just get
And
where
the
I want to
iterations
go
can be
fast.
faster, and the
Yep.
iterations can be faster for sure, right? I mean, you things that you might have taken 3 months to do, maybe you can do in 3 days, right? uh, but the iteration is still going to be there.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's interesting to see how there's still these constants, this idea of the unchanging, even when everything seems to be changing so quickly. And I think with that, like we could talk about some of these constants, or maybe some things that even come about that have been new with the heating up of AI. I think is what you had said. What about any challenges out there with AI adoption? what are some of the common things that you're seeing with the adoption, with the integration? Anything that you'd like to share with the audience in terms of what they can expect or how to overcome it?
So I think the first thing is trust, right? Humans find it very hard to trust technology. So adoption, I mean, as an example, you will see big news splash if a Tesla, car, self-driven car crashes, right? By the way, disclaimer: I don't own stock. I don't own a Tesla, right? But I'm just using that as an example.
Yes.
But thousands of human beings die in cars driven by human beings. They don't make the same splash, right?
Yep.
Right. So trust is the first thing. In what we see when we go implement, for example, one of the things we do with our clients, we do a lot of workplace safety kind of work. So is someone wearing the right PPE? Are they wearing the right? Are they bending ergonomically and so on and so forth? A lot of our clients will have this expectation saying, "Oh, but this is not 100% accurate, right? That you're not able to capture this 100 out of 100 times, right?" And so we go back and say, "Hey, think of this as a continuous improvement. Today you have no way of monitoring, right? Today you just do not know what kind of safety behavior happens in what plant, right? So you're kind of flying blind. You only know when an accident happens. Now, even if this is 80% accurate, it's 80% more than where you are today, right? And that's a whole, that's a cycle that always happens, takes a lot of time, because that's something that instinctively as human beings, we find it hard to wrap our head around that, there's going to be this technology, but it's not going to be 100% accurate. Because our expectations of tech. So one is trust. Two is our expectation
if it's not perfect, I don't want it, which is a bizarre mentality. Same pushback that we're seeing with like clean energy or sustainability, and like, oh well, wind energy creates contamination as well. Of course it does, but it's less. Yeah, how bizarre. What have you, I mean, aside from, let's say, having conversations like this, helping to educate people and seeing, the plus sides and talking about the advantages of the 80% that I didn't have before, what else have you seen or what can we do to help, shift that tide in terms of the challenges, the adoption? What's worked for you?
I think it's not an easy answer. The proof is in the pudding, right? So our focus at least is heads down, make impact with clients instead of talking about it too much, because and the irony is I'm talking about it, but we don't really do a whole lot of this stuff because there is only so much, there is enough people talking about it, right? So I would rather at least the little we can do is where we get the opportunity to work with clients, we try to make it usable, actionable, useful for our clients, and then the proof is in the pudding. And then once you build enough quantum, and it's not just it's us, it's an ecosystem. Anyone who's using AI, if all of us could every day think about how we make a client process better or how we make an experience better, right? And work on that, then I think we will build enough quantum of work that it will speak for itself.
I love that. You were coming down to the final few minutes of our show, and I wanted, to give you this opportunity to talk about maybe some of the use cases that make you feel most proud in your head down, proof is in the pudding. What's some of the really exciting stuff that you've been able to see as a result of AssertAI's monitoring?
So I'll maybe answer that in two parts, Kim. One is, the use cases that are exciting. Let me just say this. What is exciting is if users actually use it. So it's not really the use case, right? And this is, again, my going back to, we get excited about a lot of our technology, right? And I can go on and about how we do it on the edge and how it is, real time and all of that stuff. At the end of it, none of this matters. What excites me most, right? It took us, we have a client in theme parks who we started working about 18 months ago. When we first launched the product, the first couple of months, we struggled with adoption. So we sat down, literally spoke to each user. There are 65 of them.
Wow.
And we spoke to each of them, spent 30 minutes understanding what they do, how they use it, and then made very small but many changes that makes the product meet them where they were, right? So what makes me really happy and proud is we have a very engaged user set now in that company who themselves come up with saying, could we do this, could we do that? And that, A, makes their life better and makes us more money. I couldn't be happier, right? So I don't want to go down into what other use cases we do, because we do a lot of use cases and there's a lot of exciting stuff, right? But the question, and end of the day, the proof of the pudding is in how many users are using your product and how useful they're finding it. And that's what excites me the most.
Yeah, and I think we're cycling back to the beginning of our conversation today in terms of just the usability side, that human interaction. And it was humans with AI versus humans. And so you were arming the humans with AI and being a human in that, in terms of having those conversations and learning how to make things better. And I think that it's a very beautiful iterative way to end, I think, our conversation today. Shalabh, for those of people who are watching who might be interested in reaching out to you to learning more about your impact in the industry, or just kind of having the chat around AI and your adventures with you, how might they go about doing that?
They can, I think my LinkedIn profile was shared at some point. Write to me on LinkedIn, or my email is shalabh@assertai.com. So feel free to write to me there.
All
And
right.
I'm happy to have a conversation.
Perfect. Ruben will put your LinkedIn up there in just a moment. But thank you so much for your conversation with me today. Thank you for shedding a lot of light on AI, making it usable, making it actionable for us. It's a super fun conversation, very informative conversation. Of course, wishing you and your company, AssertAI, all the success.
Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. Thank you. Stick around just a minute before we go off air. But before we do, I would like to remind our audience that we do have one more show coming up this week. It's been a busy week. It's a 3-week show. We're going to wrap it up tomorrow with Rod Jimenez, who is the CEO of SHR. He's going to be talking about tech-driven hospitality, unlocking guest personalization in the digital era. And that's going to be going from everything like AI powered booking engines to data driven insights, looking at how it's reshaping the way hotels are connecting to and catering with their guests. Certainly, the human component will come back up. I am absolutely sure. Thank you again, Shalabh, and everyone else. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Yes.